I'm delighted to be alongside a client and friend of ours at TSR Legal, Julia Reynolds. So Julia Reynolds is partner, head of Clin Neg at Leigh, and also vice president of the Law Society in Cardiff. So welcome, Julia. It's lovely to be here. I'm probably as nervous as you, if I'm completely honest. It's a pleasure to speak to you. So I think I've known Julia for a couple of years now. It's been a pleasure to speak to her and see about her journey when she was at Slater's and also now at Leigh. So I suppose that brings us on to my first question. You've had quite a journey since qualification. Things have changed over the years, and I suppose what drew you into clinical negligence in the first place?
Yeah, I think when I first started to think about doing a career in law, it was that sense of justice and being a voice for people when perhaps they aren't able to have that voice themselves. That's kind of what drew me to the law initially. And I started out as a trainee doing trade union work with Leo Absey & Co. in big trade union practice that was here in South Wales. And it was I did a little bit of trade union work, a little bit of off-street kind of personal injury work before then really being drawn into that catastrophic injury work and then making a move to clinical negligence. And that just seemed to combine for me both the opportunity to help patients have a voice when things have gone wrong, but I also find the medicine absolutely fascinating. And in Clin Neg, every day is a learning day.
Yeah, I suppose from my understanding and from speaking to clients and candidates, I think what's fascinating is how long the cases go on for. I think that's something that's really interesting, because I think if you're within conveyancing or within private client, I think the transactions are so short compared to Clin Neg. I suppose you build really strong relationships with different people within that timescale, because 4+ years is a very, very long time, isn't it? What's the average case, would you say? Is there an average length of a case?
I mean, it does vary quite significantly, Ryan. And so we do a lot of maternity work. So the most significant cases in terms of value, but perhaps also impact, are the birth injuries, so the cerebral palsy type cases. And often you can't actually value those cases until those babies have grown up and they're a few years older into education. You start to understand what their challenges might look like. So they can go on for several years. And certainly I'm aware of some paediatric brain injuries where children are into their teens before they reached settlement. I think the average clinical negligence claim is probably about 3 to 4 years. Yeah. And as well as being able to develop that relationship with the clients, it comes with its challenges, because it takes a long time often to get that admission of liability and to start to perhaps get an interim payment for a client, to get a rehab package in place. Yes, it's an opportunity to develop those relationships, but it does come with its challenges.
Do you think that, obviously, I think the way the employment market, I suppose the employment market is a whole at the moment, I think candidates aren't in their jobs as long as they once were. How does that work with cases if they're going on for such a long time? I think I suppose that must be quite difficult to be able to build them relationships and then leave and then go to another firm and then not being able to take them cases with you, and obviously the cases to stay with the firm. So that must be quite difficult for both parties.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that, Ryan. And I would say that when I left my previous role, that was one of the hardest things. Was, you will never get to a point in practice where it's the right time to leave certain clients, because you've got a caseload of tens of cases. And then some of those clients you have very strong connections with, and it feels, pretty sad to have to leave them, and they've come to rely on you. And I think that's very frustrating for clients, to be perfectly honest. But ultimately, it's a reality of practice. I think people do move around a lot more. I think as lawyers, we're probably a lot more skilled at taking on a case part way through. There can sometimes be an advantage to that as well. You perhaps get a new perspective. You get somebody that comes with fresh eyes. So hopefully what you do learn in this job is that you learn to develop that rapport pretty quickly. And hopefully the lawyers will be quite dedicated to make sure that they develop that connection with the clients.
Considering the practices that we cover, it's definitely one of the most, it's so unique to where there is a law. The whole point, obviously, from our podcast is the person behind the title. So to our viewers, to aspiring clinical negligence lawyers or personal injury lawyers, your role on a day-to-day basis. What's involved in being a partner of obviously a law firm, but also practicing within Clinic?
I absolutely still love working on the files. I find them absolutely fascinating. So one day might be where you're reading thousands of pages of medical records, which I appreciate might not be fascinating
Yeah,
to everybody, but for me, it's the building blocks of a case. So I still really enjoy doing all the file work. My role has also been about growing the profile and the presence of Leigh Day here in Cardiff. So you might be at lots of events, you might be at something like the Law Society Council meetings, you might be at a grassroots organisation trying to advocate for patients' rights. So that has been quite an important part of this particular role. But something which I really also enjoy is the management of the team here. And it's working really closely with that team to try and help develop their skill
yeah.
set and their knowledge and develop their careers.
I think we always, remember the first time I met you, I think it's all about, you're saying about time and not having time to, I think your role is building an office in Cardiff, getting the brand out there, hiring staff, going out to events, managing a case. So now the vice president of the Law Society, I think, yeah, it makes you realise how much your time must be so precious at the moment, because of I suppose there's so many plates that you must be, so many plates that you must be spinning on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and that does come with its challenges. I've still got a very young
Yeah,
family. My kids are 9 and 5. And certainly my youngest would be much happier if I was at home a
yeah,
little bit more. But I think really the secret to it is that if you do something that you love, you want to do it to your best ability. Having the privilege of actually opening up a brand new office here and building a team from scratch is probably a once in a career
yeah.
opportunity.
I suppose a question to me. So, what would you say one of your, I suppose, a part of your role that maybe people outside of the firm might be surprised to learn about that you do?
I think for a lot of people, there is a perception that with clinical negligence lawyers, or maybe we don't like medics, maybe we don't even like the NHS.
Yeah,
And actually, that's just not true. I'm a big fan of the
yeah,
NHS. To have that healthcare provided free at the point of source, that's an amazing thing. But I do believe that we all have to be accountable when something goes wrong. So I think what might surprise people to know is that we have an in-house clinical team. I liaise daily with midwives in our in-house team. When a new client phones up, they'll probably speak to a midwife. Certainly, if they've had a maternity case, they get to speak to the midwife first of all. I liaise with them. They give me input into the cases. They give advice about how best to progress those cases and documentation to ask for. So actually, as a clinical negligence lawyer, you work very closely with
yeah.
medics.
So, in terms of, obviously, I think it's well publicised that the changes and the challenges within the NHS at the moment. Does that make your job harder?
It's made me busier,
Yeah,
to be frank, Ryan. We do a lot of work with patients groups, both nationally and locally. And the resourcing in the NHS has really caused a lot of significant problems. There's been absolutely more and more maternity cases, which is something we specialise in. We've done a lot of work down in Swansea Bay because there's been a maternity review.
yeah,
So it's much busier and it's growing all the time, quite
yeah.
honestly.
I suppose from a Cardiff point of view, I think until the last few years, Leigh Day was kind of an unknown entity in Cardiff. Obviously, they're a highly regarded national law firm with a fantastic reputation. But I suppose what's the secret to keeping that local community feel while managing a national law firm?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I opened the office, one of the things I was really aware of that as lawyers, we might know who Leigh Day is because
Yeah,
they've got that profile in terms of the human rights work that they do both nationally and internationally. But one of the things I was really keen to do that in terms of my broader network outside the legal community was to say, this is who Leigh Day are. This is
yeah,
the sort of work that we do. And it's important to us to work with the national organisations, and whether it's a trauma or working with a motherhood group that advocate for better patient outcomes. We also work with those community-based groups, those grassroots organisations that are there on a day-to-day basis for the families that need that support. So very much part of what I've been doing since I started at Leigh is reaching out to all those community groups and trying to help and support them. And it might be that we sponsor a Women's Health Festival. It might be one of our midwives comes down and talks to patients about how to have a postnatal debrief. But I think that to see the value of what an organisation like Leigh do, it's to work with those individual patients and to help support them.
And I suppose, how do you balance I suppose the tradition within the need of evolving business, isn't it? I think it's fine to keep that tradition, but the world is changing, isn't it? The market is becoming even more competitive, especially in Cardiff, and being so close to Bristol and links to London. How do you balance that?
Yeah, I think, the legal profession has changed absolutely enormously in the time that I've been working in it. One of the things that struck me, I think, when I joined Leigh was that you've got one of the founding partners, Martin Day, still our senior partner. He was an absolute pioneer in this sort of work. He's very much really an iconic figure to many of us. So it gives the firm real focus, and Martin still is hugely active and really leads from the front. But also as a partnership, we've got lots of young partners with lots of fresh ideas, lots of energy. And in terms of the partnership meetings, the feel of them is very much not a conveyor of information, but a collaborative working space. Often the new partners are asked to present on certain topics that are important to them. And therefore, I think that there's always a flurry of new ideas and new energy coming to the front and having that input at partnership level.
And I suppose the Welsh legal market is such a tight-knit community, isn't it? What do you think sets Leigh apart?
I think Leigh has got a bit of a sort of unique identity.
Yeah.
Often it can be smaller firms working in the human rights space, but Leigh has that national presence and profile, which perhaps gives us a stage to perhaps be more vocal in the causes that we support. I think Leigh at its heart is just a firm that really wants to do the right thing. And I feel there's an appetite in the legal profession. Many of us came to the law because we wanted to make a difference. And a firm like Leigh, whether it's doing the right thing by our clients or doing the right thing by our staff or the charity partners or even society at large, that is really their driving force. So it's not necessarily just about that commercial bottom line. So I think that's quite unique in the legal.
I think it's interesting you said about the new partners coming through different stages in their career, or partners that have been there for such a long time. I think that's so important because different age groups and things have different ideas, isn't it? And I think that's really, really important to a successful law firm, especially in Wales. And obviously practicing in Wales for as long as you have, what's some of the kind of Welsh challenges that you face, or the opportunities do you think compared to maybe the larger national areas in the UK, Bristol, London, Birmingham? Is there any unique Welsh challenges?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was thinking about this conversation with you, Ryan, I could really see some parallels between Leigh as a firm and the Welsh sort of factor to it all, because I think Wales does have a very strong sense of identity. I think they're very passionate about having that heritage, and whether it's their mining backgrounds or trade union roots, a land full of heart and full of passion for what they do. I think as an area, I think they're very keen to support Welsh business and Welsh professionals. And I think people like to see a solicitor here based in Wales. So I think there is a real opportunity for firms coming into the Welsh market to perhaps reach a market that they hadn't reached when they were outside of Wales. In terms of the Welsh profession, something that is often commented upon to me is that we as a law society are much more collaborative. We share ideas. And I think that's true. You don't necessarily see that when you go outside of Wales.
Yeah. And do you feel, I suppose, from a Leigh side, have you felt how welcoming the community and other law firms and charity partners and the NHS have been to Leigh opening in Cardiff?
Yeah, I've actually been really surprised by the amount of people that have reached out to me, to be honest, and wanted to have some conversations and perhaps do some partnerships. And so I've been really keen to do that and to let people know a little bit more about Leigh. There's a natural curiosity, and a lot of people will have read, lots of different press stories about the work that we do. So we've got lots of questions.
Yeah, and I suppose that's not just down to the firm, that's down to your reputation in the 20 plus years that you've been in the profession. I think it's always the same, isn't it? Firms' culture can be fantastic, but it's all about the people within that organization that affects the culture, isn't it? I think especially with certain firms that we deal with, the candidates are attracted to the people that work within the leaders within their field. So yeah, I think that's a big part of how Leigh will be successful, is someone like yourself at the forefront of the driving that forward.
Yeah, that's very kind of you to say that, right? And I think as the team grows, it's really important to me to recruit people who are technically strong lawyers, but also people who have a real warmth to them, who are going to be people that others want to come and work with.
And I think that probably leads me into the next question. I think the change in legal landscape around AI and things like that. Everyone's talking about AI. Everyone's talking about automation. How much of that is hype within ClinNeg, and do you think that it will change how Leigh are working moving forward?
Yeah, I think inevitably that is going to be the case, Ryan. And we have an AI committee that advise us on sort of dipping our toe into probably quite terrifying innovation that is AI. And I think we are starting to see it. So certainly some of the medical organisations that we work with in terms of sorting medical records, etc., use AI to do that. Hasn't quite managed to read doctor's handwriting just yet, but I'm not sure I have managed to do that in the 27 years I've been doing it. So I think we're all a bit terrified of AI, but there's definitely a place for it. And in terms of producing documents, I certainly think that is a good opportunity for us. We've got to be very careful in the legal market with AI because of confidentiality, but we are seeing some interesting developments, I would say. So we see new clients coming in now who perhaps have typed some details of their case into an AI machine, and that will then produce a very detailed summary. But unfortunately, AI can also be a bit creative. So some of the facts that AI then will generate are not actually true to that client's case. So you've got to be scrupulous when you're taking instructions. Do not assume something that perhaps may have been generated by AI is accurate. Interestingly, I was also at a talk the other week with some of the judiciary, and they're starting to see that litigants in person will have created submissions through AI, and AI will even create a name of a case. This is legal precedent. So I think we have to really, approach it with a very critical eye.
I think it's different practices, isn't it? I think because I went to a client recently that was in real estate, and they were asked by their client if they used AI, and the client wanted them to use AI when they're working with the client. So I presume that must be a cost. But I think as an industry where personal injury has always been very heavily, there's a lot of paralegals within the profession, isn't it? It'd be interesting to see how their roles change with the use of AI, because I think from speaking to paralegals over the years, they've had very, very high caseloads, very high workloads, and whether that will have actually a positive impact on their journeys and their workload.
I think certainly there will be a place for helping paralegals create documentation. And certainly the safeguard at the moment is that all those documents have to come via somebody like me to sign them off. It's also, I won't be here forever, and whoever's doing my paralegal work now needs to become me one day to then sign off those documents. So I'm hopeful that we won't be completely redundant as a human race.
I hope not. I think my job might be the first to go. But I suppose, as a business, as an organisation, are there any small operational changes that you're trying to implement moving forward? Because I suppose when an organisation is new in a location, I think it's probably the best time to do it, isn't it? Because I think I always say that lawyers sometimes don't like change, isn't it? Certain organisational changes, it's often met with sometimes frustration and reservations, isn't it? Is there any kind of operational change that you're trying to implement at the moment?
So we nationally, we're about to bring in a new computer system, a new case management system, and absolutely, people fear change, and I can understand that. And I think, certainly probably people of my generation perhaps fear tech change
Yeah.
in particular. But I think there is a way forward with that. And it's really about involving the staff, including them, making sure they're part of that process, asking people what do they want on their wish list for this new system to do. And I think if you involve people early and they're part of that process, then you're going to get a much better engagement later on than perhaps it being done in a silo elsewhere and then kind of presented as a finished product.
And I suppose since the kind of post-COVID where hybrid working and fully remote options are available, I suppose them sort of systems in place are even more important when people are working from home.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the time that you spend in the office now is really important because you get less time with your team. So that time needs to be more impactful, really.
Yeah.
So often the days in the office are sort of meeting after meeting and lots of collaborative time.
Yeah.
And inevitably the days that we are at home are the days that you get your chance to get your head down and get on with the file work.
I suppose Leigh, obviously before knowing you, I've always been aware that they've had a very sort of people-focused firm. As an organisation, how do you keep that culture strong across multiple offices? Is that hard to do? Because I suppose, especially opening a new office, you know what that culture is like elsewhere. I suppose you're the person in place the head of the Cardiff office. I suppose it's your job to make sure that culture is the same in Cardiff as it is in other offices. Is that difficult? Because I suppose you're new to the organisation as well. You're new learning how the organisation is run, but you want to make sure that culture is the same in Cardiff.
Yeah, that was one of, I felt, my biggest challenges when we opened the office, to be honest, Ryan, because it was with a firm like Leigh that's got such a strong sense of identity and such a kind of clear sense of purpose. I was like, how am I going to replicate that by myself here in Cardiff as new team members arrive? And I guess I took some notes from what the partnership did for me when I joined. Something that Leigh do is that they have something which is referred to as a training program for new partners. So either those who have stepped up into partnership with Leigh or those who have joined as partners. And we initially start off with sort of training programs, but effectively what it became was just a space to share ideas and thoughts and challenges. And actually there was a lot of overlap. A lot of us were feeling similar challenges to being new partners at Leigh. And what that did was create a little bit of a network across the partnership, across all the offices. And so, if I thought, I had a concern or worry, I might phone, a partner in Liverpool or Manchester and have a chat with them. And so when we've grown the team here, I've linked them up with buddies in other offices who are doing an equivalent role to their role. And actually the feedback that I've had from the staff that were already here were, oh my gosh, aren't your new team members totally amazing? We love them. And from the new team members here say, I actually really feel part of something. So it has worked, but I really think it's something you have to work at.
I think it's what's evident from knowing you and speaking to you. I think you come across that you have a very good leadership capabilities. What would you say that good leadership looks like within a kind of like a head of department, within a partnership role? What would you say good leadership means to you?
I think different people look for different things from leaders. To me, that yes, you do need to be a technically strong lawyer and you need to be in the detail of the files. But that alone is not good enough now.
No.
I think you need somebody who's going to come with big ideas, lots of energy, lots of drive and focus, but somebody who's got the ability to include people in that journey so that they feel part of that shared experience and shared process. And I think if you've got those abilities, you've got the ability to grow something really, special.
Do you feel you've had to adapt your leadership skills since joining a new firm, different culture, completely different firm to maybe where you previously worked before? Do you feel you've had to adapt the way that you work?
Yeah, I think so. I think the Leigh partnership is quite different. It's I said before, in some partnership meetings, it can sometimes feel like a conveyor of information that the decisions have been made elsewhere, and you're just being told
Yeah.
ahead of the rest of the staff what is going to be the new system or process. At Leigh Day, it's much more of a collaboration, so they want to hear from you, and so I've been invited to come and speak at AGMs and say, what do I think about different initiatives? And I think that could be a bit daunting when you join a new partnership, quite frankly, because you think, well, I've only been here 5 minutes, I don't want to offend anybody. But actually, I think it really enhances the experience, because if you've got a strong partnership, there's nothing to fear from that.
Yeah.
And you might suggest an idea and that idea might not be, great. But actually from that start of a conversation, you can build upon
Yeah,
that.
I suppose it's when you're new to a partnership, having them ideas, it's sometimes hard, isn't it? Because you don't want to feel like, oh, you're putting your own ideas in straight away, isn't it? But I
Yeah.
suppose it's good to have them ideas early on. I think something that we're seeing, especially within the legal market as a whole across South Wales, is retention of staff. I think firms are starting to realise how important it is to retain staff, and because of how difficult it is to get certain members of staff within certain roles. So I think retention and career development are really, really big issues within the Welsh market, and really, really important points. How would you say that you're tackling sort of that career development and retention within the firm? I know it's early on, and the firm is only just at the start of the initial growth phase. Is that a big thing for yourself? Because I suppose it's important, once you've started to get these people in place, you want to make sure that they stay, and you want to make sure that they have a successful career.
Yeah,
Is that something you're looking at early on?
also good. Everybody stayed so
Yeah.
far, but we're still pretty young, and inevitably there will be times when people
Yeah.
want to move on and develop their career elsewhere, and that is of course absolutely fine. I think there are things that we can do to try and mitigate that happening, both nationally and then in our own office. So nationally, for example, we've just been recertified as a great place to work. We did it last year. We got some feedback. We took on board that feedback and we got better results this year. We've just been accredited as a real living wage employer. One of the benefits that we offer the staff is that on the days that they're in the office, they get fed their breakfast and lunch. And that's a pretty popular benefit. I think locally in our office, I think it's really important that you make it clear to your staff when you appreciate them. So I run monthly one-to-ones with my team, and throughout the month I keep a little note of anything they've done that's been really good. So I would always say to managers, don't just say you're brilliant, you're fab, keep doing what you're doing. Be specific. People want to know exactly what it was that they did well and what you liked about it. And secondly, make a space to talk about what their career hopes for development are. And that might be to get qualified, or it might be that they want promotion. But sit down with them, go through that promotion criteria, talk to them about how can they demonstrate those things. Shows them that you're committed and you want to support them in that development.
I think I could actually, it's interesting you said about noting down things. I think that's a really powerful tactic that I think any manager within any organization can use to really, really motivate the staff. And I think well-being and flexibility are two things that are quite big within the industry at the moment. I suppose, how do you approach that well-being and well-being piece within the organization?
I think my natural approach as a manager is to really try and be as flexible as possible. And I appreciate some leaders won't subscribe to that particular perspective. My perspective is on it that law is a hard job.
Yeah.
It's long hours. It's stressful work quite often. And if there's something that you can do to try and help support an employee, then I think we should do it. I think that if somebody's saying, look, I don't feel 100%, can I work at home today? Or I've got a medical appointment, it's easier if I'm working at home today. I would always try and accommodate that. It's Christmas time. If you've got children in their school play, people ought to be going to those and seeing those performances. I think that we work with lots of very dedicated and talented professional people, and they deserve their respect. So you should absolutely try and accommodate that flexibility where you can. In my experience, whatever flexibility you show staff, you get it back twice. I think you will occasionally have some individuals who perhaps won't respect that and value it. But my view on that is tackle it with that individual. Don't punish the rest of the team for it.
And I think I always say that to clients, that it would be such a shame that if someone came to you and they said the reason for them leaving was because there wasn't as much flexibility as they wanted because they had children. I think that would be a really, really sad thing for an employer to find out. Things like salary or location or I don't know, progression to partnership they can't offer. Them things sometimes you can't change. But being able to drop your children off at nursery in the morning, or be able to pick them up on the odd occasion, or go to a concert, it doesn't have to be all around children. I've got individuals that I deal with that have pets, or they've got caring responsibilities. It's treating everyone the same, isn't it? And it's I think the way the world is, I think we're seeing it so important for candidates and clients alike, really.
Absolutely.
I suppose from a Welsh point of view, would you say there's any sort of trends that have shaken the Welsh legal market over the next 2 years?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting time in the Wales market, and I see lots of new firms are coming to the market. I think that there's been a broader perspective where people have seen the opportunities in Cardiff, and you've got a really skilled workforce, and you've got a capital city here with lots of the amenities that go with it. I think it's interesting now with the transport links. People can get to Bristol and get to London much more quickly. So I think that has meant that some of the salaries have had to keep pace with that. That combined with hybrid working means that it's not the same as somebody saying, all right, I've got to go to London 5 days a week, or I've got to go to Bristol 5 days a week, perhaps twice a week. And so people are much more prepared to do that. So I think that really changes the landscape for the recruitment market. I think different firms are very different about how they're approaching the kind of hybrid working. And I know there are firms out there who are saying, look, we offer complete flexibility, work the hours you want to work, when you want to work them, where you want to work them. And there are others which are being more prescriptive. I anticipate that as the market develops here in Wales and they've got the opportunity to go perhaps to London and Bristol, that there will be much more of a negotiation point at that point of recruitment. What does that role look like? How many days do I need to be in the office? What hours do I need to work? And all of that balanced with the salary. So I think it isn't always just about who pays the highest salary. People want to have a balance. They want to have a life. And it's not that everybody always wants to be a partner these days either.
Yeah. I think we saw it kind of post-COVID, where we saw a lot of lawyers going to Bristol firms for the higher salaries and the 2 days in the week in the office, or 1 day, or even going to London. But I think since then, in the last sort of 2 or 3 years, we've seen so many more Bristol law firms or even London law firms coming into Cardiff, and lawyers are starting to realise, actually, I don't need to go to Bristol, I don't need to go to London to have them fantastic opportunities in the market. And I think what we're seeing is that if firms aren't able to offer that, they're the firms that are going to struggle to hire. But I think it's a really, really good opportunity for firms maybe that have been always established in Cardiff to sit back and look, right, this is my workforce. What are we doing right? What are we doing that can be improved? And how are we going to be able to compete with the firms coming in? Because I think exactly what you said, it's not just about salary. There's numerous things that it could be affected. It could be benefits as a whole, hybrid working, flexibility, quality of work, routes to partnership. So I think it's a good opportunity for firms to really look at what they have and how they can improve. I suppose an interesting one is if you could maybe, ways of magic wand, was there one operational challenge for Welsh firms, and what would it be?
I think for me, where I am currently, probably my biggest challenge is there's not enough hours in the day. There's not enough days in the week. That's probably my biggest challenge at the moment. Likewise, it is about having that kind of balance, because I work 4 days a week, so I still have a 3-day weekend, so that I try to rebalance things with the family at that point. But yes,
I don't think that's entirely true, because I think I've spoken to you many a Friday, so I don't think that's entirely true that you work a 4-day a week.
I could tip my right to silence on that one, right?
But I suppose trying to fit everything into often people tell me that when you work a 4-day a week, it's often you're trying to fit that fifth day into the 4 days, isn't it? It's not often as easy as saying that you're working a 4-day week, because your clients don't stop needing you, or the staff, or the business as a whole, isn't it? And I think that's something that I'm awful for, if I'm completely honest, is trying to manage that kind of, if I'm on holiday, if I'm away, switching off.
Yeah.
How do you find that when you're on going on holiday, or spending time with your family, or even when you're not supposed to be working? Are you good at managing your time in that sense?
I would say that's variable.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah,
It
not
wasn't
so,
the question that we discussed. So.
not at all. Very, very variable in terms of how I manage it.
Yeah.
Historically, I was always one of those people that would be looking at their emails every day when I'm on holiday.
Yeah.
I guess my partner and I had an agreement. I could have an hour where I kind of furtively tried to scroll and answer as many emails as I could, just to give myself a sense of actually it's okay.
Yeah.
I think the interesting thing where I am now is that we work as a team on these files.
Yeah.
So it's not just one lawyer on the file. And, you know, I've got an enormous amount of time for the team that I work with. So that is definitely helping me step back a little bit. Am I perfect? Absolutely not. Am I still taking that phone call or those meetings on a Friday? Yes, I do that sometimes. But it's something you've got to just keep trying to keep that balance.
And the team that you got in place now, you're able to do that, and you're able to, I'm away, and they're on the files for you, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I think that's important, isn't it? When you're at this early stage in your growth as a firm, getting the right people on board, you can able to have some time off. You're able to relax more. When it was only when you're on your own trying to build up another caseload, there's no time to do that, isn't it? I suppose looking ahead for the next 2 years, like it's crazy how long you've been here already and how much you've achieved in a relatively short pace of time. What excites you for the next year, 2 years working here?
I think there's great opportunities for Leigh Day here in the Cardiff workplace. I think there is opportunities for us to grow and do more in terms of the clinical negligence work that we do. I've been surprised by how many cases we've already brought in and how many staff I've had to recruit very quickly. But I absolutely don't think that we've even touched the tip of the iceberg in terms of what is capable for us to do here. And I absolutely want to go out and grow those relationships with the community groups, both here in Wales, but also across the Southwest. But I think that there is an opportunity here. We do personal injury, we do industrial disease, we do human rights work. The human rights team is huge in terms of spectrum. And I would love to see us get representation in all of those teams here in Cardiff.
I think it's interesting because when I first spoke to you about when you joined and things like that, and how quickly, was it a surprise how quickly you built that case up and how quickly you were able to expand? Was that quite a shock?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think anybody working in business planning, a new office, you write a business plan.
Yeah.
That business plan was complete nonsense, Ryan. I had no idea the volume of work that was going to come in. And it's been hugely reassuring to me, the various sources that work comes through. So we're not overly dependent on one source. And I think for any business, you want to see that you've got that security that makes it look sustainable.
Yeah.
Because I was probably a little bit nervous to recruit initially, because I was like, well, will the work continue to come? And a little bit over time, you get that reassurance that it is sustainable, and therefore you recruit with a little bit more confidence. And I think in one of the last rounds of recruitment that I did, I started out the process saying I need one lawyer. And by the time it came to offer, I was like, actually, no, I need 2 lawyers. So absolute delightful, but a shock.
For aspiring lawyers within personal injury and within clinic, what would you say, what's your best piece of advice for people just starting in their profession, whether they're a paralegal or legal assistant or a secretary or even training contract? What's your best advice would be to them?
Yeah, I think it's a really tough time for students entering the profession at the moment. You know, we're very much at the beginning of the SQE process, and I think there's a lot of bedding in for that process to do. I always would say to students, get as much work experience as you physically can, because it will give you really good insight into what type of law you want to do and what type of firm you want to work for. It's become a lot harder to try and get work experience now, but if you can, do try and do that. We're just about to open applications for external candidates for training contracts in January. And we're also setting up a scheme with a focus on social mobility for work experience student applicants. So just get to know the firms that you want to work for, do your research, get to know the people who run those teams, and you will be much stronger applicants when it comes to trying to get that role. And I think that once you get that role, it's really about being part of that collaborative process, be part of the team, volunteer for opportunities, but ask questions. It's, I absolutely love my role. I think that, the legal profession is still a great career for somebody.
I think that's the advice that we give. I remember when I was starting off, I think there's so many. I had a paper round. It was work experience within a golf club, and I think it's just trying to find your niche and trying to volunteer as much as you can to get your nose in front of firms, isn't it? I think that's really, really key. What would you say your best advice you've ever been given in your career?
I think there was a piece of advice which I think was probably very good advice, but I will be frank and say that I probably am still not very good at following it, because the advice is learn when to say no. And I am just one of those who will always just say yes. And so in 27 years, Ryan, probably the closest I've got to following it is being able to say yes, but not until X.
Yeah.
So I think that if you can set realistic parameters, because what you don't want to do, and I probably have been guilty at times in the past where you say yes, 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 and then you get overburdened.
Yeah.
So try and say no sometimes, but if you can't say no, say yes, but set a parameter.
Yeah, nice. I suppose if you weren't a partner within a law firm and you hadn't have gone down the legal route, was there any other roles or any other professions that stood out to you in your early part of your career?
To be honest, in the early part of my career, I was absolutely focused on wanting to be a lawyer. As sad as it sounds, Ryan, that was all I really wanted to do. I think as I've got older, there are certain aspects of my job that I really enjoy, and I'm fascinated about how people tick, and the psychology of that. So I could see myself doing something like executive coaching, where you really work with someone very closely and you help them develop, and really, reach their dreams.
Why law? So who? Family members, friends?
Nope.
Good career coach at school?
No, absolutely not. I didn't know anybody that was a lawyer. I'm a farmer's daughter from Shropshire. I was the first in our family to go to university. It was just something, I think, about the idea of that sense of justice and wanting to advocate, to hear those people's voices who can't always speak for themselves. And there was just something that massively appealed to me. And I started doing work experience, I think, from about 14 or 15, and I then did it consistently. And every time I was in practice, and it didn't really matter what kind of practice I was in or what type of law I was in, I absolutely loved it.
Yeah. Interesting. So I suppose, touching on something slightly different now, your role within the Law Society. So obviously, Vice President, Cardiff Law Society. What does that involve to someone who's not maybe familiar with the Law Society or familiar with the Cardiff in general?
So I'd been on council for several years. When I was asked by Trish D'Souza, who's just been our outgoing president, and Emma Waddingham, who's our incoming president, would I consider joining the senior exec team? And quite frankly, at the time, I probably should have said no. And yet again, I didn't say no, I said yes. And I think that what motivated me to say yes was that the opportunity to work with Trish and Emma was just too good to pass up. The Law Society is really what you want to make of it, I think. I think you need to have that passion and dedication to the profession and think, what can I do to make it better for the profession here in Cardiff? And both Trish and Emma have got that absolutely in spades. They're real advocates for our profession. And different presidents bring different things. So Trish, for example, did the pro bono work and set up getting pro bono champions across different law firms and getting people access to justice. Emma is going to set up a network for non-lawyers that work in the legal profession. So everybody will bring something different. And it might not be, when you first join counsel, all that apparent to you what it is that you will bring. But the more time you spend on that council, talking to people, collaborating, it's a brilliant opportunity to meet people across the spectrum of the profession. There will be something that you can bring.
Yeah, Julia, thank you. It's been a pleasure to see you and speak to you as always. Thank you for your time. I hope everyone's enjoyed listening. If anyone wants any further information about Leigh Day, reach out to Julia. I'm sure she'd be more than happy to have a conversation. Thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Ryan.